At the company's award ceremony, they told me, "You can wait outside." My colleague mocked, "Why would we waste a chair on you?" I looked around. Everyone else had a seat at the table, even the intern who stole my idea. So I grabbed my file, turned to my colleague and said, "Check your email." I walked away, closing the door behind me. The CEO called. The vice president ran out. Jordan Miller had worked at Alera Tech for 7 years. 7 long, quiet years. The kind of years where birthdays passed unnoticed, projects were delivered on time without applause, and feedback, if any, came in the form of vague nods from managers who barely remembered his name. He sat at the same cubicle in the same corner, with 2 monitors, a ceramic mug with a cracked handle, and a chair that squeaked only when no one else was around to hear it. He wasn't bitter. Not exactly. Jordan prided himself on precision, not recognition. His satisfaction came from clean lines of code, predictive models that actually predicted, and algorithms that could cut server loads by 30% without anyone needing to ask how. But that year had been different. That year, he had built something extraordinary. The project, codenamed Kronos, was a deep optimization framework designed to adapt in real time to changes in user traffic, learning patterns, and allocating resources dynamically. It wasn't flashy. It didn't have a slick interface or a name that would impress VCs. But it worked, and it worked better than anything the company had in production. He had tested it, documented every function, and prepared a comprehensive presentation for his manager, Laura. She nodded through it, smiled politely at the end, and said, "This is great. You should share it with the team." That was 2 months ago. The annual Alera Tech Innovation Summit was held at the company's main campus in San Francisco, a modern building with glass walls, a courtyard filled with succulents, and a rooftop lounge where executives gave awkward toasts under strings of Edison bulbs. Jordan wasn't on the list of speakers. He wasn't invited to the prep meetings. No one asked for his slides. But he attended anyway, sitting in the back with a badge that simply read Jordan M. beneath the generic title data analyst. The auditorium was buzzing, lights dimmed, music pulsed gently. The CEO, Frank Delaney, strode on stage with the confidence of someone used to being the center of attention. He welcomed the crowd, cracked a rehearsed joke, then introduced the first speaker, Kyle Redmond. Kyle had joined the company 8 months ago as a data science intern from Stanford. He had bright teeth, sharp suits, and an Instagram profile filled with filtered photos of coffee cups and whiteboards. Jordan remembered when Kyle had approached him one afternoon asking to pick his brain about a framework he had heard Jordan mention during lunch. Jordan had been cautious but helpful. He shared some documentation, explained the logic, even walked Kyle through a few scripts. Now Kyle was on stage presenting Neural Adaptive Resource Scheduling, a new internal tool designed to revolutionize Alera Tech's server efficiency. It was Kronos. The name was changed. The UI had been polished. But every line of logic, every unique optimization technique, every clever workaround for known bottlenecks, it was all there. Jordan's work, delivered with Kyle's smile. The crowd applauded. Delaney clapped Kyle on the back. Laura stood near the wings of the stage, arms crossed, nodding as if she had expected this brilliance all along. Even Derek, Jordan's desk neighbor, leaned over during the break and said, "That was fire. Dude really cooked. You must feel stupid for hoarding ideas instead of making them count." Jordan didn't answer. He just stared at his cup of weak conference coffee. There were no seats left for him in the lunch area. So he sat outside on a bench beside the parking lot, plastic utensils poking out of a paper bag. He could hear the muted sounds of laughter from inside. Derek's words echoed in his ears, especially the last thing he had said when passing him earlier that morning. "Why waste a chair on you?" He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his cloud storage. There it was, the original prototype folder. Dates, logs, commit history. He found the email where Kyle had asked for access to just review a few things. Jordan had granted it reluctantly. Kyle had left the folder untouched for weeks, then suddenly made a copy the day before the summit slides were due. Jordan knew because the access log timestamp was still there. Kyle never disabled the notifications. He opened the Photos app. Screenshots of his own slide deck. The architecture diagram, the same one Kyle had animated for his presentation. still showed Jordan's initials in the metadata. He had even included a private joke in the file name, Chronos final underscore for real this time. He closed the apps and just sat still for a long moment. The chill of the San Francisco breeze crept through his thin conference hoodie. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline and the Innovation Summit turned into an open-bar networking mixer, Jordan quietly walked back into the building. He passed by Kyle, who was surrounded by a group of developers, all laughing a little too loudly. Jordan didn't look at him. He walked to his desk, opened his laptop, and connected to the company network. He started writing an email. By the time the office lights dimmed and most of the chatter had faded into laughter from the rooftop bar, Jordan had already finished composing the email. He didn't send it immediately. He read it twice, scrutinizing every line. Not for grammar, but for tone. He wanted it to feel cold and precise. Not angry, not hurt, just irrefutable. Facts arranged like code. One line building upon the other, until there was no more room for interpretation. The subject line was simple. Chronos, original development documentation. No dramatic wording. No accusations. Just a timestamp bomb, primed to detonate the illusion Kyle had so eagerly built. He had debated whether to include screenshots, but the logs were strong enough. Dates of original commits. Folder activity. Internal notes from weeks before Kyle ever touched the concept. Slack messages where Kyle asked vague questions under the guise of collaboration. A spreadsheet with comparative performance metrics. Jordan's early model showing marginal improvements that would later become the exact selling point Kyle had emphasized on stage. Most importantly, he included a screen recording he had taken while building the final model. Something he did out of habit when experimenting with new structures. His voice was on the recording, narrating steps to himself in a quiet murmur, describing decisions in real time. The date on the video predated Kyle's first access to the folder by almost a month. He attached it all. Then, with a steady hand, he added 3 recipients. The CEO, Frank Delaney, the Vice President of Engineering, Nora Kim, and one member of the board Jordan had only met once during a hackathon dinner, Dr. Emilia Torres, an old-school data scientist who had spoken candidly about the culture of intellectual theft in the tech industry. He didn't CC anyone else. Not Laura, not HR, not even Kyle. And yet, as he hovered over the send button, he hesitated, not because of doubt, but because of what it would mean afterward. There would be no going back, no way to pretend it had been a misunderstanding. He was setting something in motion that would burn through layers of comfort and complicity that the company had built around their rising stars. Then he thought of Derek's laugh, of the empty chair, of Kyle's smug half-smile during the applause. Jordan clicked send. No fireworks, no notifications. Just a quiet whoosh and a return to the empty inbox. He shut the laptop, packed it into the leather case he rarely used, and walked toward the exit. The office was nearly empty now, save for a few late-shift engineers murmuring over DevOps logs in the war room. He didn't say goodbye to anyone. He simply passed through the automatic doors and into the stillness of the evening air. The city was buzzing, but Jordan felt strangely calm. He walked down Market Street, letting the traffic and neon signs wash over him. A couple passed by laughing, hand in hand. Somewhere nearby, a food truck pumped out the scent of grilled onions and cumin. Jordan didn't stop. He wasn't hungry. Not tonight. The next morning, he didn't go to the office. He worked remotely once a week, and today, he decided, would be that day. But there was no real work to be done. He refreshed his inbox every hour, but there was no response from any of the executives. No acknowledgement. No confirmation. It wasn't until early afternoon that the first signal arrived, a sudden shift in the company's internal Slack channels. A private engineering group that had once included Kyle as a moderator was now showing his name as guest limited access. Threads about the Chronos project disappeared entirely. A generic message appeared in the hashtag engineering announcements channel. Please refrain from sharing project documentation externally. If you have concerns or questions, contact your team lead. By evening, Derek messaged Jordan directly. Dude, what did you do? Jordan didn't answer. Later that night, he received an auto-generated calendar invite. Meeting with Executive Oversight Panel. The invite came from Nora Kim, scheduled for 2 days later. Mandatory. In person. That night, he slept without setting an alarm. No dreams. Just silence. The next morning, the company issued a statement via internal memo. It was sterile and corporate, but the meaning was clear between the lines. An internal audit is underway to ensure the integrity of all innovation claims presented at the recent summit. We reaffirm our commitment to ethical attribution of work and respect for all contributors across teams. The memo was signed by Frank Delaney himself. There was no mention of Kyle, no names, no blame, but the subtext was deafening. Jordan watched the online reaction unfold in small, quiet waves. A few co-workers shared vague posts on LinkedIn about the importance of recognizing true talent. Others stayed silent. Kyle's profile, once filled with comments congratulating him on his breakthrough presentation, had begun to attract a different kind of attention. Questions, doubts, polite skepticism hidden in the form of curiosity. Can you elaborate on how the project evolved? Were you working alone on that framework? But the most telling change came in the form of erasure. Kyle's name was removed from the internal documentation page on Confluence. The video recording of his summit presentation was taken down from the company's shared drive. In its place, a message, temporarily unavailable under review. Jordan didn't gloat. He didn't share cryptic quotes or post self-righteous threads. He didn't even tell his parents. Instead, he opened a fresh document, titled it Kronos Rebuild, and began outlining a new version of the framework, this time from scratch. No attachments, no shared folders. Just him, the code, and a quiet determination not to let this version out of his hands. 2 days later, he walked into the boardroom as requested. The long table was flanked by unfamiliar faces, legal, compliance, and a silent HR observer scribbling notes. Nora Kim was there, seated beside Frank Delaney, who did not smile. Dr. Amelia Torres at the far end, hands folded, eyes steady. They didn't ask him to defend himself. They didn't accuse him of anything. They asked one question, and one question only. Can you confirm that this documentation is yours and that you developed Kronos independently? Jordan nodded. Yes, and I can prove every step. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The silence that followed was heavier than any applause he'd never received. The boardroom meeting concluded without any visible signs of drama. Jordan had walked out the same way he walked in. Composed, silent, unreadable. No one followed him. No one patted his back. The halls of Alera Tech remained neutral, as if the most significant fracture in the company's internal culture hadn't just been acknowledged behind closed doors. But while Jordan returned to his temporary remote status, the pulse of the office began to shift in ways that could no longer be hidden. By noon that same day, the changes began to ripple outward. The product team's stand-up meeting was abruptly canceled. The weekly engineering sync, previously mandatory and usually led by Derek or one of his close peers, was postponed indefinitely due to scheduling conflicts. Internally, Slack statuses began flipping to in a meeting or busy at odd times. Conversations dried up. Project timelines were restructured without explanation. Whispers moved faster than code commits. Within 24 hours, Kyle's name was officially removed from the Kronos file tree on the server. His user account remained active, but only barely. A handful of employees noticed that he no longer had access to the company's data lakes or the protected repositories tied to sensitive infrastructure. His Slack avatar still showed him smiling against the backdrop of an artificial beach, but he hadn't posted in any channels. Not even a meme. It was as if he had evaporated. Some employees tried to act as if nothing had changed. Derek, for instance, doubled down on his normal banner, still loud, still quick to chime in during video calls, though something in his tone had softened. He no longer threw out half-jokes about people overreacting to recognition. His words now landed with uncertainty, like darts thrown by someone who no longer trusted the board behind them. But others, especially newer hires, started asking quiet questions. Why had Jordan disappeared from the floor? Why were all project presentation files under review? Why were team leads being pulled into one-on-one meetings with Nora Kim and the legal department? No one had clear answers, but everyone had theories. most of which orbited the same unspoken truth. Someone had called out the system, and the system didn't know how to respond without unraveling. Meanwhile, Jordan had not returned to the office. His calendar was open, but he took no meetings. His responses to internal messages were minimal. When Laura emailed him to touch base and clarify expectations for your role moving forward, he replied with a single sentence: "Expectations are currently under review by those qualified to find them." He copied Norakim. Laura did not respond again. 3 days after the boardroom meeting, a company-wide email was issued under the subject line, "Commitment to Integrity and Innovation." It began with lofty statements about Alaritech's vision and the importance of collaborative excellence, but midway through, it shifted tone. "We have recently conducted a comprehensive audit of our internal innovation pipeline. While we celebrate the many talents within our teams, we must also hold ourselves to the highest standards of originality, transparency, and fairness. Effective immediately, new processes will be implemented to safeguard intellectual contributions and ensure ethical practices in project attribution." The memo was signed not only by the CEO, but by every member of the executive board. That afternoon, Jordan received an encrypted file via secure email. It contained a detailed review of the investigation, along with a formal acknowledgement. His Kronos framework had been misrepresented and utilized without proper attribution. The document did not mention Kyle by name, but outlined the events with surgical precision, referencing internal timestamps, version histories, and activity logs that matched Jordan's original submission. The final paragraph stated clearly that corrective measures had been taken and that Jordan's role in the development of Kronos would be recognized in all future internal and external documentation. He read it twice, nodded once, and archived the message. What followed in the next week felt less like a revelation and more like a controlled implosion. Kyle's internship was formally concluded, though the phrasing of the exit notice was vague. His email account returned a default: "This user is no longer with the company." His personal belongings were boxed and removed by HR before most employees arrived that morning. No one saw him leave. Derek, on the other hand, received a different kind of treatment. He was not removed, but he was issued an official warning for failure to report attribution concerns when made aware of them. It was not just a slap on the wrist. It went into his permanent record. His presence on the leadership track vanished. He was reassigned to a less visible support team and stripped of his mentorship duties. In team meetings, he spoke less. He stopped cracking jokes altogether. In private channels, developers whispered about the shift. "Did you see the internal note?" Kyle's entire repo access history got flagged. "I heard Jordan might be getting his own team." The last one, though still speculative, was not unfounded. There had been closed-door conversations between Jordan and Norakim. At first, they were short, then longer. Eventually, a new calendar entry appeared under the title Strategic Initiative Planning. Confidential. What surprised Jordan most was not the fallout. He had expected the internal politics, the silence, the reassignment of roles. What he had not expected was a number of quiet, private messages from people he barely knew. Data analysts, junior engineers, UX designers. Some said nothing more than "thank you." Others wrote paragraphs detailing their own small frustrations, moments they had been overlooked, credit stolen, ideas passed off to louder voices. They did not ask for anything. They simply wanted him to know that his stand had been noticed. For the first time in years, Jordan began to feel something close to respect. Not the loud, performative kind that filled all hands meetings or LinkedIn endorsements, but the quieter, weightier kind that moved beneath the surface, unspoken and deeply felt. He began to keep a small list not of names but of traits: who had stayed silent, who had spoken truthfully, who had shifted blame. It was not for revenge. It was for preparation. A storm had passed through Alaritech, one that had exposed its cracks. Jordan had not created the wind, but he had refused to be uprooted by it. And now, as the building settled into its new alignment, he knew it was only the beginning. The foundation had been shaken, and foundations, once shaken, either collapse or rebuild stronger. Jordan arrived early for the meeting he had been avoiding, internally labeling as vindication. It wasn't that he wanted to gloat. He had passed that desire weeks ago. But the invitation alone, coming not from a manager but from the executive board, meant something had shifted. He entered through the east wing entrance of the Alaratech headquarters, where few employees usually walked in. A security guard gave him a slight nod, perhaps out of routine, or perhaps because Jordan's name had become less anonymous over the past few weeks. The conference room this time was not the boardroom from the earlier interrogation, but one level below, reserved for what the company called initiatives of organizational renewal. The door bore no sign, but when he stepped in, he was greeted not by a crowd, but by Nora Kim sitting beside a smaller, high-table arrangement with a single folder and two laptops open, side by side. She stood when he entered, extended a hand, and gestured for him to sit. "This is not a formality, Jordan," she said as he settled in. "You're not here as an employee being managed. You're here because the company needs to shift its direction, and you're in a position to shape part of that direction." She opened the folder and slid it toward him. Inside were outlines, drafts of a new division structure, a proposal for an innovation-first lab with complete autonomy from a standard product pipeline. The terms were tentative, but serious. The division would not be marketing-led. It would be driven by data, by real testing, and by results, not visibility or stage presence. Jordan didn't respond right away. He flipped through the pages silently, absorbing the weight of each line. Budget allocation, team formation, reporting lines. His name, printed clearly at the top of the last page, under the provisional title Director of Strategic Integrity Projects. He looked up. "You're offering this because of what happened." "No," Nora said calmly. "We're offering this because of what we failed to see before what happened. What you built should never have been handled by interns or passed over by middle management. You've operated with clarity in a system that punished it. We don't want that system to survive. We want something else to grow from it." Jordan set the folder down. "And Kyle." Nora's expression tightened. "Gone. Officially. There's a legal agreement preventing us from speaking further, but I'll say this. His exit was not on his terms, and it won't be forgotten internally. Not by us, and not by the teams who watched it unfold." There was a silence between them. Not cold, but weighted. A pause of consideration. "You don't have to say yes today," she added. "We just want you to know that the decision is yours now, not anyone else's." Jordan left the meeting with the folder in hand, but more notably, with something he hadn't expected to carry out with him. Control. Not influence. Not clout, but control over the next move. The next few days unfolded in a surreal kind of calm. He wasn't bombarded with questions or welcomed by celebratory posts. No one rushed to congratulate him, but the air around the company had changed. Derek, whose energy had withered since the reprimand, passed in the hallway and offered a nod that was neither friendly nor hostile, just quiet acknowledgement. Laura kept her distance entirely. Her name now rarely appeared in strategic emails, and there were rumors, whispered cautiously, that she had been reassigned to a satellite office role in operations, a shift designed to avoid embarrassment rather than confront it. What Jordan did receive, however, were messages from names he didn't recognize at first, analysts from other branches, developers from different departments. Even 2 employees from the company's European offices reached out, sharing brief but sincere notes of support or curiosity about the coming division. They wanted to know what kind of team he intended to build, what kind of principles would define its work. He didn't answer all of them immediately. He spent time sketching, not designs, but outlines of structure. He listed the names of people who had quietly stood for integrity when it mattered, even in small ways. Those who didn't stay silent out of fear, or who showed hesitation when the crowd cheered Kyle. He remembered one UX researcher, Leah, who had emailed him months before with feedback on an earlier prototype of Kronos, constructive feedback that was detailed and curious, not dismissive. He found the email, replied to it, and scheduled a meeting. Within a week, a list began to take form, not just of names, but of roles and guiding principles. Jordan wasn't building a team to compete with existing products. He wasn't interested in reshaping Alaratech's public image. What he envisioned was a lab within the company, a space where ideas were nurtured quietly, thoroughly, without the constant pressure of selling them before they were ready. A place where metrics mattered more than buzzwords. By the end of the month, the company announced the formation of a new division in a brief internal memo. No fanfare, Just a line under the banner, Strategic Reorganization. A new internal innovation unit, focused on data-driven integrity in product development, will be led by Jordan Miller, formerly Senior Data Analyst. That day, Jordan moved into a new office, not luxurious, but separate. A glass partition framed one side, and through it, he could see the team area slowly being reconfigured to accommodate the new lab. Old desks were moved out, new equipment brought in. No posters, no slogans, just space. Some employees tried to reconnect with Jordan during that transition. A few came bearing coffee, compliments, or vague offers to collaborate. He remained courteous but distant. He knew the difference between interest and opportunism. The former had been rare. The latter had nearly cost him everything. The most surprising visit came from someone he hadn't seen in weeks. Maya Chun, a machine learning engineer who had always stayed under the radar. She stood at his door with a folder in hand and said only, "I've been working on something quietly. It's not finished, but I thought maybe you'd take a look." He did. The model she presented was elegant, raw, and carried the same kind of spark he remembered seeing in his own early prototypes. He offered her a chair, and just like that, the first real member of his team found her place. Not through a hiring pipeline, but through a shared understanding of why this new space existed. Outside, the company moved forward. The rooftop bar returned to hosting awkward networking events. The glass walls remained polished. But inside Jordan's division, the rules were different now. Not louder, just better defined. And this time, the recognition didn't come from applause. It came from building something that no one else could take. Jordan arrived at the office before sunrise. The city was still caught between late-night silence and early morning movement, a liminal space he had come to appreciate in recent weeks. The lights inside the innovation division flickered to life as he stepped in, passing through glass doors that no longer felt like barriers. Everything about the space felt deliberate, quiet, grounded, functional. There were no awards on the wall, no design flourishes to impress visitors. Just white boards lined with diagrams, test results neatly pinned to cork panels, and a communal table where coffee sat next to architectural sketches and data flow maps. It was the first official meeting of his new team. The lab, still unnamed in public-facing materials, had taken form quickly over the past month. From the outside, it was seen as a neutral space, safe, unaligned with office politics. Internally, it had already begun to grow a reputation for producing clean, verified work at a pace that defied expectations. No one in the team spent time branding their output. No one fought for credit. The work spoke for itself. At 7 o'clock sharp, chairs began filling. Jordan had extended personal invitations to every member. He hadn't recruited based on resumes alone. He had observed, taken notes, cross-referenced behaviors, and decision-making styles. The people now seated around the table weren't just talented. They were thoughtful, measured, and quietly relentless. Leah, the UX researcher, had accepted without hesitation. Maya, whose early models were already refining their latency optimization tools, had grown into a central figure in less than 3 weeks. Alongside them sat Andre from Backend Systems, Ria from DevOps, and Chris, a technical writer whose ability to distill complexity into clarity made him indispensable. Jordan sat at the head of the table, but not for show. The position gave him perspective over the room, nothing more. No one seemed intimidated. No one performed. They opened laptops, reviewed their notes, and waited for him to begin. "Thanks for being here on time," he started, glancing briefly at the team, especially when the company's still half asleep. A small laugh moved through the room, brief, organic, unforced. "We're not going to operate like other teams," he continued. "We're not here to outshine anyone or steal attention. But what we do here has to hold up. Against scrutiny. Against time. If we're building something, it needs to be stronger than whatever came before it, and protected from being diluted once it leaves our hands." There were nods around the table. No one asked for clarification. They understood. He clicked the remote, and a single slide appeared on the screen, a flowchart titled Trust Before Throughput. "This is not a framework," Jordan explained. "It's a principle. We test first. Always. If a model fails quietly but scales beautifully, it still fails. If an idea is efficient but lacks accountability, we scrap it. We document. We attribute. And we don't move forward unless everyone at this table signs off. He let the silence linger for a moment, then closed the slide. After the meeting, people returned to their respective corners of the space. But the momentum didn't waver. Ideas started moving through whiteboards and shared drives like current through a circuit. Jordan didn't micromanage. He didn't need to. Everyone understood the stakes, not just for the success of the division, but for the integrity of the system they were now re-engineering from within. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to stretch golden light across the buildings outside, Jordan remained at his desk, reviewing the latest round of test results. The numbers were promising, more than promising actually, but he held back from sending them forward to the executive team. He wanted another layer of confirmation. No shortcuts, no early celebrations. Just as he reached for his mug, the familiar chime of a new email echoed from his screen. The subject line was short formal. Inquiry, external collaboration proposal. The sender was a name he recognized immediately. Alan Wick, Senior VP at Cygnus Analytics, one of Laratech's main competitors, and a key player in applied AI development across the West Coast. Jordan opened the message. It was concise, respectful. Alan wrote that he had been following Jordan's work since the internal audit became quietly known across the industry. He expressed admiration for how Jordan had handled the situation and noted that Cygnus was in the early stages of building a similar integrity-focused innovation unit. The email concluded with an invitation. If Jordan ever wanted to explore leading a broader, higher resource initiative with cross-sector reach, Cygnus was ready to have that conversation. Jordan leaned back slightly. He didn't react outwardly. He reread the message slowly, not because he doubted its content, but because of what it represented. Recognition not from a friend or former colleague, but from a rival who saw something worth acknowledging, something impossible to fake or replicate. He didn't reply. Not immediately. He flagged the message and moved it to a separate folder. He wasn't dismissing the opportunity, but he wasn't in a rush to leave either. What they were building here still had too much left to define. Jordan stood and walked back toward the main lab. The team was huddled around a terminal, reviewing real-time feedback from a deployment test. Maya pointed something out on the graph. Leah was already sketching a possible adjustment to UI pathway. No one waited for permission. No one asked who would get the credit. They just moved quietly, effectively, together. For the first time in his career, Jordan felt the fullness of ownership, not just of a project or a patent or a result, but of the space itself. A space where he had chosen the people, set the standards, and built the rhythm of work that did not rely on corporate flattery or performance politics. He walked back to his desk, sat down, and resumed his analysis. The numbers would still need another pass. The model had potential, but potential was not enough. Not here. And as the office lights dimmed into the late evening, Jordan opened a fresh document titled V1, Protocol for Independent Verification Layer. He typed the first few lines, paused briefly, and then continued without hesitation. Outside his office, the building might return to its usual noise. But inside this lab, they were building something that could endure.